This conference will now be recorded.
The Wichita Historic Preservation Board meeting will come to order. I'd like to welcome everyone in attendance. First item of business is roll call. I would like to start with District 1. Please state your district and your name. Janice, we see you there. I'm Bob Potter. I'm with District 2.
Helena Engel, District 3.
Janice Baum-Dixon, District 4.
Gary Bond, District 5.
Claire Willenberg, District 6.
Thank you.
And I'm Bruce Rowley. I'm the mayor's appointee.
Okay, the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
Willenberg moves we approve the agenda as written.
Engel seconds.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say yay.
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 Those opposed state nay. Are there any abstentions? The agenda is approved as written. There is no correspondence, so the next order of business is to approve the September 12, 2022 minutes. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
May I have a question?
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know that it's necessary, but the approval of the windows on the Douglas property included an adjustment of the brick lower level that it remain consistent with other windows along the block. Is that necessary to have that in there for the record?
I believe it is because that was different from my recommendation.
I'm sorry, does that mean I need to add a correction to the minutes?
Sure. What is a correction?
That the proposal was approved as presented with the addition that the lower brick ledge remain on the windows.
Okay, noted. I'll make that correction.
Thank you.
With that correction, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Engel move the corrected minutes be approved.
Rich seconds.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the the September 12, 2022 minutes with one correction. All those in favor, please state yay.
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 Opposed, state nay. Are there any abstentions? The September 12, 2022 minutes are approved with the correction. The next item is public comment. We ask that if there's a public comment that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Does anyone wish to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item 7, unfinished business. And this deals with the signage issue. And I'll have Christina open.
Good afternoon, everyone. Christina Reith, Associate Planner. We are revisiting HPC 2022-84. The applicant is Palmer Partners LLC with Brian Kirkland Miracle Signs as the agent. They are requesting 7.5 foot by 7.5 foot neon signage on the south elevation of a building whose property address is 129 and 121 North Mead Avenue. And the recommendation by the historic preservation staff is to deny. The property is a contributing building within the Warehouse and Jobbers Historic District, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is also within the Old Town overlay. And according to the Historic Preservation Plan, there are architectural guidelines for the Old Town overlay, which are shall be reviewed by the Historic Preservation Board in accordance with these standards. The architectural design guidelines for the Old Town District. The Historic Preservation Committee has reviewed this application and found that 5 design guidelines that apply to the subject site have not been met. Those guidelines are that sign lighting should be compatible with the historic character of the street. The light for a sign shall originate from an indirect source. Light shall be directed at the sign from an external shielded lamp. A warm light similar to daylight is appropriate, and use neon in limited amounts so that it does not become visually obtrusive. I also have an additional packet that comes from the code, which I've passed out to you guys. There are extra copies here, and it talks about how individual letters may be backlit. But it says also in the code that neon and or incandescent bulbs are allowed. So I'm not sure if that meant neon bulbs or if that meant neon signs, but we interpreted that as neon bulbs. In the past, there have been illuminated signs administratively approved by the historic preservation staff within the Old Town overlay, but those may not be in compliance. The warehouse district is listed in the National Register of Historic Places under Criterion A. There are 8 key contributing buildings, 38 contributing buildings, and 15 non-contributing buildings. A little bit of background on the current address of 121 and 119 North Mead Avenue. So it was a 1905 brick warehouse, and it was originally 3 stories with a full basement. However, after the 1911 fire, all that remained were 2-story exterior brick walls and the basement. Noted Wichita architect Fred McCoon revised his design for the new building to incorporate the extant 2-story brick building using the brick walls for the original basement. Let's see. So based on the Old Town Overlay Guidelines, staff recommends denial of this application. And let's take a look through the photos here that I have. So this is the proposed signage. It is a skeletal neon sign. Next slide, please. This is what the sign will approximately look like on the building when it measures 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet. Next slide, please. This is what it would look like, or that's what the building looks like now. Next slide, please. And here we can see some externally non-illuminated signs on that side of the building. Next slide, please. Sorry. Is lit up. Okay. Okay, thank you. And here is another picture of the building. Next slide, please. And this is looking east away from the site. Next slide, please. Oh, and that's all the photos that I have. And I will now stand for questions by the board.
I think at the conclusion of the last meeting, one of the charges of the board was to go back and research the requirements as well as make a trip through Old Town to get a feel of the various signages. In researching the requirements, they seem to be somewhat convoluted. I think that our focus here today should be to specifically talk about neon signage, not neon and fluorescent. And then secondly, we need to request the city to provide additional guidelines in this area, because as Christina pointed out, this has been inconsistently enforced. And I think it's fairly open for interpretation. So if you look at the existing language of the Planning Commission, item 77 says the use of neon and other incandescent bulbs may be considered. My driving around Old Town, I found several cases where neon was used and looked quite appropriate. So with that, I will open up to other board members.
Well, as a longtime board member, I would like to point out that sometimes we reject something that is then passed by city council. So the fact that there are some things in the Old Town District that do not meet with our approval is not something that we can go by, since it's up to us to follow the guidelines that we're given by the people that are in the know, and whatever is done after we make our decision is something that we have no control over.
Yeah. So in my conversation with the staff, I don't recall, or staff doesn't recall any cases that have gone to city council after the Historic Preservation Board meeting.
I have a question for the miracle sign person. You want them to go up there?
Yeah, if you're asking a question just for the people who are here virtually, they need to hear it through the microphone.
When
I'm Zach, and this is Matt Roth.
Well, Zach, I'm going by memory when you were here last time. And you briefly said that this is not a neon sign, it's something else, but I can't remember what you called it.
No.
You said it was similar to a neon sign, but now we see that it's a neon sign. So can you explain that?
Yeah, I did not state it wasn't a neon sign. It is a skeletal neon sign. So what I had said was that it is not fluorescent or backlit. So.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. I just had it wrong here.
Okay.
And just to clarify, skeletal is the neon actually being seen in the sign, not backlit. If that makes sense.
It's exposed. So
It's
like
exposed.
if you were to look at Hotel Old Town, that's a skeletal neon sign. All of the signage on the Warren, City Arts, that's skeletal neon. Heroes, that was a skeletal neon sign. And it's very prevalent in the Old Town area.
So that means that the bulbs, you could see the actual glass bulbs that are neon. That's the ones that are not skeletal, right? Or is that called skeletal?
When you can see the bulbs, that's skeletal.
That's skeletal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it would have been very prevalent in the 20s when neon came to the Wichita area.
Yeah. I think by looking at that picture there and, just visually looking at it, you can't see the little tubes, and I think it gives a little question mark to us. Yeah.
You can see if can I go to the previous page or?
Yes.
Is it-
Previous slide.
Previous slide, please.
And Jason's rendering may show up.
Yeah, I have a rendering too, if that helps. But
We have a better rendering of it.
would you like if I showed that now? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Scott Wadle, Planning Department Director. And I just wanted to comment that this is a difficult case. And I think part of the reason why, and Christina's pointed it out in her presentation, but I just want to highlight it, that we have two documents essentially that we're working with. We have what's in the municipal code and talks about what signage is allowed in Old Town. And then we have a second document, which I think was from 1998, if I remember correctly, and that is the Old Town Guidelines. And the language in both of them, as we're going through this, doesn't. I think there's some areas for interpretation here where they're not quite lining up. The third thing I would encourage you all to take into account is also past precedent in terms of what's been approved and what exists today in the Old Town area. And so, as staff, we're very, very grateful to have you all here to hear this item because we need some help on interpreting this and which way it should go. So just those three things really to consider, the two documents and past precedent. Hopefully that helps you kind of frame what the issue and what the question is.
May I ask a question really quick? Just to the whole board. I think it would save a lot of time if we let Zach go over his presentation that he has today. I know you all are interpreting what the code says, but I think it would be beneficial to have Zach present at this time as far as what he's uncovered from a history standpoint as well as code standpoint. That I think it would save a lot of time versus just asking questions and then coming back to it. Good. Okay.
Before you do that, I have a question. When just looking at the drawing while they're getting that set up, what do you have an idea of what percentage of that wall that sign covers?
Off of the top of my head, I don't have it.
Have to be on the meeting.
Have to be on the meeting.
I think so.
Is there any way I can?
Yeah, because typically when we plug it in, it
It
shows.
just goes over there. There's no like.
Typically, this is
So when I plugged this in, that went out.
Oh, it's here. Got it.
All right. Here's just a rendering we did after the last meeting. This sign was designed by Garrett Fresh with Idea Ranch. And typically, if someone comes to us with a design, we usually don't go into like a full night shot like this. But we thought it would give a good idea of what that would look like at night. So I'm trying to switch slides here.
It looks awfully big.
This is just kind of a brief overview of our company. My brother, the president, he's here with me today. I am the, not president, but vice president. And then Brian Kirkland, who submitted originally for the permit. He's our general manager. He has over 25 years of experience in the sign business. And I will reference Tim McFall, one of our fabricators who has over 40 years of sign experience or neon experience and learned to bend neon from somebody that bent neon in Wichita since the 40s. Here's just a kind of a close up. This will give you an idea of the 3 strokes of clear red neon that we have. And it's with a red background. Here I've highlighted what MAPD is interpreting the guidelines that this sign does not meet the guidelines of so sign lighting should be compatible with historic character of the street. The light for a sign shall originate from an indirect source. Light shall be directed at the sign from an external shielded lamp. Internal illumination of a sign is inappropriate. A warm light similar to daylight is appropriate. Christina, from our conversations, it sounds like the way MAPD is interpreting that sign should be floodlighted, or basically a light is projecting at the sign. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the use of neon in the Old Town overlay, you're interpreting as, can you explain that?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I zoned out.
Okay. As far as neon is considered in the Old Town overlay, how is the MAPD interpreting that?
So the MAPD interpreted number 77 that it's the use of neon bulbs to be, that would be the light for the indirect source, because it says neon and or incandescent bulbs. So I'm assuming neon is an adjective here for bulbs.
So from my conversations I've had with Dave Burke, who is one of the co-authors of this guideline, he's here today. Dave has stated to me that the use of neon is a replacement for line item 76. So instead of a flood lamp or flood lighting, neon would be permissible. I also have included or one of the things I state in here on the right-hand side of this page is neon would not be used for floodlighting just because it would wash out the lettering or the logo. And we did some homework here. This is from the signage source book. It explains how to floodlight a sign. And one of the things it says to use is incandescent light, metal halide, or fluorescent. One of the lights that is not mentioned in this paragraph is neon. So this is a book on how to build and make signs. So. And then it's my understanding we're into an interpretation. We have one of the original co-authors here who can talk about, he'll talk about this later, about how this is intended to use neon in all forms. And also the neon we'll be using, it'll be just as bright as any other sign in Old Town, so it will not be visually obtrusive. One thing I found interesting from the guidelines is if you look at this photo, there's two signs on the top left, backwoods and first gear. Those are skeletal neon signs. The guidelines were printed in 1998. So this picture was taken sometime 1998 and before. I also, I have a picture of the first gear sign. If I were to able to, or if I could zoom in, I don't know if I can't zoom in right now, but that's a skeletal neon sign. Within the same building, Heroes, this is also a skeletal neon sign. Heroes is one of the first tenants in Old Town. The blue line is skeletal neon. The red around it is skeletal neon. The white letters Heroes is skeletal neon. Through conversations with Christina and MAPD, one of the things we've talked about is the theater district. And when you read the amendment, there is no mention of neon, not one. What it calls for is illuminated signs may contain flashing and moving elements and may change brightness, but such signs shall not include strobe lights or any lights which could be mistaken for emergency vehicle lighting. Our sign will not be blinking or flashing. A sign or part of a sign may move or rotate. A theater marquee sign may be backlit, may be plastic, and may project more than 8 feet from the vertical plane of the building. The last line in this paragraph, it says additionally signs within the entire Old Town district must be illuminated indirectly except that individual letters may be backlit. This line allows for halo lighted letters and for signs that are floodlighted. So again, when we look at what this amendment does not address, it does not address neon. It doesn't address any change in lighting standards that refer to light being visually obtrusive, unless the allowance of flashing lights means the removal of a visually obtrusive line. There is no mention about differences in historic character in this memorandum at all. And then I think this is what you'd referenced earlier, the historic preservation plan by the Wichita County Area Planning Department says that within the OTO district, the use of neon and/or incandescent bulbs should be allowed. Also, when you look at the guidelines for the signs in the historic districts within the state of Kansas, this is a pamphlet put out by the Kansas Historical Society. When discussing neon, they say illuminated signs were not common until the introduction of neon in the 1920s. However, illuminated signs are often desired. It goes on to say, neon signs that are compatible in size, scale, and placement are signs that are compatible with historic buildings and districts. So as far as interpretation goes, I'd like to have, Dave, are you able to speak, or DJ? Okay. DJ, okay. Real quick, I'd just like to introduce Dave. Dave is one of 4 co-founders of Old Town. In addition to co-founding Old Town, Dave was a co-author of the architectural design guidelines for the Old Town district, which we're discussing today. Dave is a previous head of the Wichita Historic Preservation Board, and as a co-author of the Old Town architectural design guidelines, Dave is to discuss how we should interpret the items we're discussing today. So go ahead, DJ. Thank you.
Hi, I'm DJ Berg. I'm here representing my husband, Dave Berg. We are husband and wife and co-partners in our business, Marketplace Properties. The reason I'm here today is Dave suffered a stroke 1 week ago, and he would love to be able to talk to you more than anything else. But right now his ability to communicate is impaired. So as an example of how important this issue is to Dave, he's here today. He has spent the last 3 days trying to help me understand, with his limited communication skills, the value of neon in the Old Town district. So we have prepared just a brief summary of our feeling about neon. Interpretation of guidelines for the past 30 years has supported the use of exposed neon and set a precedent, which has allowed businesses to have signage that conveys their brand, their commercial personality, and in turn, their economic vitality. The use of exposed neon in the Old Town area has been an integral part of who we are as a district, and a part of the reason we've received 2 national awards for smart growth achievement and great places in American neighborhoods. It is our belief as Old Town founders, developers, business owners, and now residents, as well as being passionate supporters, that the use of exposed neon brings not only light, but color, expression, and vitality to our neighborhood. We urge the Historic Preservation Board to continue to allow the use of exposed neon, and we greatly appreciate your time and consideration on this. I know you don't have an easy job interpreting multiple sets of guidelines. In closing, I just want to say that back in the early 1980s, we would put our family in the station wagon and we would drive up and down the streets of what is now Old Town. It was dark. It was falling down. It was a little bit scary to take kids down there, but we did it. And Dave would talk about his vision for what this area could look like. I have to say that 40 years later, it has come true. And now that we live downtown, I can't tell you, I know this sounds corny, but I can't tell you what fun it is to look out at night and see color and see light and see signs of life. And for those reasons, I urge you to consider allowing exposed neon in our area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other further discussion?
Could we go back to the picture of where the sign is on the side of the building?
Yes, we can.
You know, in our guidelines, it says building signs should be located so as not to dominate the building or so as to emphasize the architectural elements and should not obscure architectural details or cover windows or moldings. It doesn't cover anything, but to me, it's very, very large. Is there any way we could make it smaller?
It would, if you were to do that, it were to lessen its visibility from Douglas. If you were to look at, if you're to look at this sign here, this is a hotel at Old Town. This is a 3-story neon sign.
But that's a little different.
How so?
It's not on the side of the building. It's not a big part of one side of the building. And that the one that we're looking at is a very large part of that side of that building.
Matt, what percentage did you say that was of the building?
This is off of speculation, just looking at the rendering that he had earlier, as I would guess it to be 5% or less. I'm waiting on my designer to look at that and send me a text message, but I haven't heard back from him. But I think ultimately, if we're discussing size, that goes down to permitting with the city and what's allowable. Zach can also show you another photo, because when you look at the OTO, it doesn't necessarily mention specifics to size. But when you do look at that amendment, or that memorandum that was done in 2002, is that 2001? That was obviously directed for the Warren Theater that was placed, that was built around that time. Is that correct?
Around 2001.
Dave, do you know that by chance, when the Warren Theater went in? No. But you can tell that that's what it's going towards. And I want Zach to pull that up so you can see how large that signage is and how much neon is on that sign.
Theater things are much different than just the plain buildings.
So if you look at the amendment, there is nothing in there that describes exception for size. I can pull that back up again, but yeah. Yeah. So this is Garrett Fresh. He's the one that designed this sign. He'd like to say a few words as well.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm partial, obviously, to this sign. Could we get to the where the building is? Okay, thank you. I think what we're looking at here is we're looking at the southern facing part of the building. And if you were to take in consideration that there is a portion of the building that faces due east that is just coming right off of that south face, which is just as big as what we're looking at, you get a much larger face of that building. So if we isolate this, what we're looking at now, of that south face, is just, that was the only part of the building we're looking at, yes, that sign probably would appear quite large. But if you look at what's running east down Mead, and then what is jogging off camera there back to the south that's facing east, the sign actually, in my mind, is sized appropriately. But again, I'm partial because I designed the logo, I designed the sign, and you know, I have a huge love for Old Town. I have a huge love for downtown. I'm born and raised Wichita, and I remember growing up and knowing that the Old Town district, when it was just the warehouse district, and it was nearly abandoned warehouses. And so seeing it come alive and working on the signs through the years, I actually worked on the Hotel at Old Town sign, the Grant Telegraph Building sign, the Old Town monuments that are downtown across from the Farm and Art Market building. I've worked on a number of signs down there, and in my mind, they do nothing but beautify the area. And if something like this speaks to the vitality of downtown, it is not necessarily advertising for us. Honestly, we advertise national clients like Carhartt, Under Armour, Cargill, Fidelity Bank. So I could argue that maybe only a small percentage of people that see the sign are actually our customers. So what we're doing is we're making a statement on this building, not to Idea Ranch. Yes, we are, but it's a statement for downtown. It's a statement to its vitality, to how long we want to be there, and how much we believe in Old Town, and it's our commitment to Old Town. So where he didn't make a 20-foot by 20-foot backlit sign with motion. No, we didn't do that. We tried to do something that was tasteful. We tried to do something that would reflect both the aesthetics of the building and speak to its authenticity of our company. So I wrote up a whole thing. I'm not going to bore you guys with what I have. I do hope that you consider the sign because in my mind, the red is not bright. It is a nice touch of color to the area. Again, I hope you consider it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Garrett. And I think it's important to know that neon is not a blinding light. It can barely be seen in the daylight if it's on. At night, it's just got a nice glow. I did just get a message from my designers, so to answer the question as far as the square footage that it takes, which is actually including the negative space inside of the logo, it is 3.12% of that wall. But I think when it comes down to the size, I think it's important when you look at the original OTO code that it calls out that the neon is to be used but not obtrusive, which is unwelcoming. When you look at the amendment that was made when the Warren Theater went in, there is nothing that says anything about the acceptance of large amounts of neon or a large sign. It just discusses flashing lights. I think that's a key point that should be considered.
Bob, are we, it seems like there's a couple of things going on here. One is this particular installation, but are we also, no.
We need to address this specific issue, and then this part of our conversation is going to be for the future.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Just trying to make sure I understand what decision we're making when.
I have a
Can we get our
comment.
board back on the screen?
May I have a comment also?
You mind if I leave this?
Or we're waiting for that, or is there any further discussion?
Yes,
Well,
I have a comment. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You have the floor, Claire.
Okay. I would agree with Elena that the size of the signage distracts from the architecture of the building and is obtrusive. I think it could be smaller and still be very visible from the street. Personally, I don't know why you want to, unless you're screening all the air conditioning and mechanical equipment, which would be great. I don't know why you want to draw attention to that side of the building. But I do think the precedent has been set. I think it's very ambiguous, the guidelines that we have. But if we are to keep neon to a minimum, I think that's another reason to suggest a smaller, slightly smaller sign. Thank you.
Bruce?
Well, I think it's important to understand, I do understand it's on that south side of the building because that's where the traffic is going to see it coming. It's a north-south street. That's what faces Douglas. There's nothing blocking it from there to Douglas. I guess looking at it from this perspective, it's large. I'd be curious as to whether we're to expect additional signage on that side of the building. Is that a dedicated wall for this tenant? Do we have an answer on that? Well, I don't just mean from you, I mean at all. In other words, is it going to be this sign and then there's going to be another one next to it and another one next to that? Are there plans to have additional signs on this wall, or is this it? Well, that answers my question. I mean, as far as neon goes, as far as neon goes, I was living down there when it was all dark as well, in a warehouse in 1986. And the most exciting thing that ever happened back then was a building caught fire. And so it is really exciting to see the neon. I think of neon as being period lighting. So I think that works. And looking at it from this perspective, standing back from the building, the size doesn't bother me as much as it did when I was looking at it a little closer. It's always difficult in these renderings, but overall, I think it's been a great presentation, and certainly a lot of research done into showing all the different signs that exist down there. It's fun. It's actually been fun to see them all again. So with that all.
Are there any additional comments?
I'm sorry, could we have a verification of the answer to that last question? There are other tenants in the building. Will we be seeing other requests? And I'm sorry, we could not hear.
In answer to your question, there are no signs, there are no plans for additional signs on that side of the building.
But there are additional tenants, right?
The second floor is all.
Yes, there are additional tenants. They have signage on the opposite side of the building.
Thank
and
you.
I do have to say this photograph is a little bit deceiving as to the actual magnitude of that building. It's quite a bit larger. I would just guess it's at least 3 times larger than what you see here. In my opinion, and I'm not an artist, but I don't think it should be any smaller. It will lose itself in the scale of the building.
But aren't we looking at a photograph of the building?
Well, yes, but the sign itself is photoshopped onto that building.
So are we thinking the signage would actually look smaller if that is the right ratio of the building?
I believe that's a comment that DJ made.
Well, I took that as you have to understand that this building, we're looking at it from the south where we're only seeing a third of the actual building. If we were looking at it from the north, the building we're looking at goes, there are 2/3 of it are to the west here, but they're obscured by the building that's on the south side of it here. So I guess looking at it as the total scale of the building, again, if you were to, even if we were looking at this building not dead on here, but if we were looking at it from an angle from the street where you would be seeing both the east face and the south face, you'd get a much different perspective on the scale of the building, the building itself.
I understand that point, but to me, we're comparing only the south face with the size of the sign, because if you were standing in front of the building, you wouldn't see the sign. So why would we add that into that perspective? I'm okay with the neon. I'm not okay with the size. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
So one thing I'd like to
Quite honestly, I'd like to call the question. We've discussed this to the point where I feel like we're going in circles. I would like to make a motion that we accept the application as written.
I'll second that.
The motion has been moved and seconded. I'd like to request a roll call vote. Janice Rich, please, in your roll call vote, please state yay, nay, or abstain. Janice, how do you vote?
Yay.
Gary, how do you vote?
Yay.
Robert Potter, District 2, I would vote yay.
Elena votes nay. Engel votes nay.
Chris Engel, nay. Christina? I'm sorry, Claire.
Nay.
Janice,
Janice already voted. It would be Janice.
Janice.
Janice votes nay.
who am I missing?
This is Janice. Oh, Bruce. This is
Janice.
Janice. She said nay.
What's the count?
It's now Rowley.
Bruce.
I'm going to start taking it personally, Bob. Rowley votes yay.
So I have 4 yays and 3 nays.
The motion carries. The second order of business I'd like to discuss here is the need to revise and or amend both the planning guidelines as well as the city code. And I would encourage our participants here today to work with Christina on getting recommendations on how we can word them. Because this is the second in 3 weeks where we've had this discussion. We need better guidelines and we need to reflect the rules that we can enforce, not have to interpret.
Noted.
Actually, I'd like to make that a motion that we revise the planning guidelines as well as the city code.
Rowley seconds.
May I ask in what to what you're referring? What part of the codes are you proposing we change?
I would like for them to look at items 76 and 77 of the guidelines.
For the overlay specifically, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. And all references in the overlay and the various districts on the use of lighting and signage.
Noted.
Is there any discussion?
Can we add that to the amendment? I mean, to the vote?
No, I would like for this to be separate.
I'm sorry. What is separate? That what you are looking at?
So the motion is separate to revise the planning guidelines for the Old Town overlay and for the preservation plan.
All references to the lighting and signage.
Correct.
Right. That's the part I wanted as part of the motion. Exactly what we're voting to amend, as you described.
I think she's asking that you restate the motion.
Okay, I'll restate the motion. I move that we revisit the guidelines and the city code with respect to signage in the overlay district.
Rowley seconds.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say yay.
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 All those against, please state nay. Are there any abstentions? The motion carried 6-0.
Seven zero.
7-0.
That's all right.
I'm just going to assume that wasn't me you were leaving out. You were leaving Engel
He
out.
probably was leaving me out.
That'll take us to the consent agenda.
Christina Reith, Associate Planner. The following items were approved On consent, according to KS, I don't have the exact code in front of me. I apologize. HPC 2022-94, replacement of a 5-ton air conditioning unit and 120,000 BTU gas furnace at 151 North Rock Island. HPC 2022-96, replace 5 drains and waste openings at 1523 North Fairview. Refrigeration work at 124 South Broadway, according to HPC 2022-106. HPC 2022-107, replace the roof with a TPO on 2320 East Douglas, which we'll later hear today. HPC 22-108, change out the rooftop HVAC unit with one of the same size at 506 East Douglas. And HPC 2022-109, replace external AC unit on a non-contributing building. Yes, we are already at 109 historic preservation reports. This is at 1110 North Emporia.
Engel moves that we accept the consent agenda in accordance with KSA 75-2715-2725 as amended and section 2.12.1015-1025 of the City of Wichita Code of Ordinances.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Rulenberg, second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please state yay.
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 Okay.
Against, please state nay. Are there any abstentions? The motion carried to approve the consent agenda 7-0. Which takes us to project review. The first item is HPC 2022-00101.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have Bel Air Apartments LLC as the applicant and Daryl Lefew as the agent for this project. And they're requesting to replace all the second-story windows and mullions with aluminum-clad windows and mullions. The subject property is zoned LC Limited Commercial District. It's also a contributing building on the Ash Grove Historic District, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, and staff recommends approval of this application. So the applicant has notified the historic preservation staff that the current windows are beyond repair because, as you know, with the standards, they should be repaired rather than replaced. However, if they are beyond repair, then we want to match as much as possible in terms of texture, material, dimensions, profile, and so on and so forth. So a little bit about this building. This is the TJ House Grocery Building. As I mentioned before, it is a contributing building. And the facade that you see here is from 1940, but it was originally constructed as 2 separate buildings in the early 1920s. So on the western half of that building, there's a 1914 Sanborn map that illustrates a small frame building, or sorry, that would be on the eastern half of the building. And then between 1914 and 1935, 2 new commercial buildings were built. The west building was constructed in the early 1920s and it had 3 commercial bays. The 2-story brick building has a 1940 red brick facade combining 2 formerly separate 2-story buildings. The red brick facade features square stone panels at the corners of the storefront and upper windows, as well as subtle brick detailing and corbelling at the cornice. Based upon the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, staff recommends approval of this application. I'll reiterate standard 6 that says deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature will match the old in design, color, texture, and where possible, materials. Replacement of missing features will be substantiated by documentary and physical evidence. So if we could go to the next slide, please, to show the windows here. Next slide, please. So as you can see, they're in pretty bad condition. Next slide, please. And some of the windows have already been taken out. The applicant has informed me that this was a safety hazard. Next slide, please. And this is looking away from the site. And I believe I took all the photos of the exterior. So just a little bit of background. These are Anderson E-Series windows. They are aluminum clad, and they're also single hung with 4 9/16 inch frame depth. There are plastic jam liner inserts and then a half screen for the windows. And I will stand for questions. Oh, I forgot to mention there are renderings. I do apologize, but those should be included in your packets.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I'll tell you, I drive by this building and I've watched them since before they started work on it, and those windows were literally rotting out at the front of the building. So yes. I don't have any doubt that they were required from a safety standpoint to be removed, and certainly were irreparable.
And I believe the applicant or the agent is here as caller 1. Do you have any additional comments you'd like to provide for the board?
Oh yeah, hi, Daryl Lakeview here. This is the applicant. Basically, I'd like to reiterate the condition of the windows that are there now. I personally was tried to close several a few weeks ago when we had a chance of rain locally, and for the most part, they fell apart as I tried to close them. So it's difficult to repair something like that, and I have experience repairing windows, including old windows. It just was something that we could not save, and from a safety standpoint, it made sense to move on to something else.
I saw some reference to mullions somewhere, but I don't see mullions in any of the pictures. Was that left out? Was that something you decided not to put in?
You might need
they
to
look
move,
great just the way they are.
You might need to move the microphone a little bit closer.
I'm sorry. I noticed that it said something about mullions on the page 2. Okay, good. And I don't see pictures of mullions on any of the pictures, so I wondered if that was something that you had changed your mind about, or actually it looks just fine just the way it is, but I just wondered if that was going to be done or if it was something you decided not to do.
The best way I can answer that is that we looked at many different options on windows, and even though there's a lot of choices for windows, something that would fit the design of the building as closely as possible in a modern window made it a little difficult. We still, as you see in, and I don't know what I don't see the page numbers, but on the technical data we provided, some of the windows, multiple windows, do have mullions involved. The renderings were done before we found windows and do not necessarily match exactly what we're putting in, but the technical data we provided is an exact representation of the windows we want to use.
Okay.
I think they look great.
I think
I'm super excited to see this building come back to life.
Yes. They look very nice.
We would like to have a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Rowley moves to approve.
Engel seconds.
It's been moved and seconded to approve HCP 2022-00109,
101.
101. All those in favor, please state yay.
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 Opposed, state nay. Abstentions? The motion passed 7-0.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Next item on the agenda is HPC 2022-102. The applicant is Wichita Public Schools Superintendent, and the agent is with us today with Ron Sign Company. And they're proposing to install a 14.5-foot by 8-foot pole sign with a 35 square foot LED board. It's zoned TF3 two-family residential, and the property is listed on the Wichita Register of Historic Places. And the recommendation from the staff is to deny. However, we do have some alternative recommendations that I'm going to present to the board. So the proposed sign will be placed on the south side of this property, very close to where, or right off the access drive. So does my mouse work here? Yeah, so, yep, so right around where that mouse is hovering, it'll be around there. There will be an additional non-LED sign on top of the LED board that will have the Wichita North High School logo, and that will measure 2 feet by 8 feet.
I wasn't looking at your picture when you were talking about where the.
So it'll be placed right around here where can you see my mouse?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay,
yeah.
so it'll be right around there. I do have another picture of where that's supposed to be, but we'll go through the photos.
Okay.
A little bit of background on this building. Wichita North High School is a 3-story Art Deco building that was completed in 1929. That was opened after the Wichita East High School and the Wichita High School were overcrowding, and so they had the option to expand to another school. It has a face brick exterior wall material, a reinforced concrete foundation, and a tile variegated pitched roof. The school features a prominent tower with windows and reliefs at the top. It has steel windows and a polychromatic terracotta and sculptures and smooth Kansas Silverdale stone along the sills and in bands around the roof line. It was constructed, or the architect for this was Glenn Thomas, and some of the sculptures that are featured in North High School are by sculptor Bruce Moore. He has a lot of prominent sculptures throughout Kansas, and then Honolulu's National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. And a little bit of case history here. So the school was added to the Wichita Register of Historic Places in March of 1979. There's a lot of different changes that have happened to the building. So it looks like there was an ADA compliant ramp in 2016, some terracotta repair at the school's tower in 2002, re-roofing parts of the building in 2020, removing the smokestack due to safety issues in 2021. And then this, so once it goes through the Historic Preservation Board, whatever you guys recommend, they'll also need to apply for a variance to allow an electronic message sign within a historic district. And it's currently in review as an administrative adjustment by the planning department. So based on the guideline for signs in historic districts and on individually listed properties, staff is recommending denial of this application. However, it is staff's opinion that the proposed metal and LED pole sign is not compatible with the building's historic terracotta and masonry materials, polychromatic features, size, scale and proportion, and massing. However, I do have some alternatives. One is that we keep the LED board, but we have it be a monument sign instead, and that we were able to implement some materials that are more compatible with the district, because I do understand the schools need to advertise important events and upcoming dates and so on and so forth. The applicant also has the option of placing the sign outside of the parcel that the school is on, so it doesn't even have to go through the Historic Preservation Board. And then you guys can also recommend alternative designs and present them to the applicant and then form a design review committee for that. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Do you have any pictures of what you have in mind?
Oh, yes. Let's go through the photos, please. I'm sorry. So this is the back of the building. Next slide, please. There's the famed beautiful tower. Next slide, please. And this is, I believe this is a newer addition on the building. Next slide, please. This is just the athletic fields that are non-contributing. Next slide, please. This is the donut shop across the street. Next slide, please. And there's a little Arkansas River. Next slide, please. And another parking lot. Next slide, please. And this is what they're proposing. This is where the sign will be placed in relation to the school.
And tell me about your recommendations for something else.
So I had a conversation with my colleague in Milwaukee who recently approved a monument LED board sign. This would be shorter in height, and it would be, in my opinion and staff's opinion, less visually obtrusive than a pole sign.
Yeah. So it would be basically on the ground.
Close to the ground, that's correct.
But would still have the flashing letters and the neon signage and that type of thing, or what?
Well, there wouldn't be any, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there would be no neon on the sign. No neon.
Thank you. An LED board, okay.
And would that make it more of a brick monument where maybe it fits better use materials of the school?
Yeah, I was thinking along the lines of masonry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I think that the stone, what we call just stone, which would blend with the existing school and with the bridge nearby, you know, a stone monument sign sounds much better to me too.
And are we talking about an LED board that would move, or just that the message would change?
I will defer to the applicant agent for that question.
My name is Anders Herpelsheimer. I work for Ron's Sign Company. The board itself will not move. It'll be in one position. The messages will change. We will follow city code protocol on how long the duration of a message can be, because obviously you get into, if you change messages too fast, it starts to look like flashing lights. So we stay away from that. We have a letter of now I'm drawing a blank. But a letter that says from USD 259 that says they will abide by the city rules for message lengths, changing the brightness from day to night, so it's not overbearing. Once you change to night, the brightness will tone down and it'll look like a regular sign.
If you put it in another location, would that be on 13th over right where the old Dillon's is, and that still property of the school system?
So I've been in contact because we got hired by a third party company that was hired by USD 259. So I kind of got a snake trail of how my messages get back. They talked about possibly moving it over there to 13th Street, the parking lot that's there across Rochester. Well, looking at the GIS map, I think that sign that's there is grandfathered in because it does not sit on the property. It sits pretty much between the property line and then the street. So there's like a handful of parking stalls on either side of it, and that sign are not in the property. So as well as there's an overhanging power line that goes directly above the current sign they have that's on that property.
Well, I think if they want to keep it looking like this, that it's appropriate to put it over in the parking lot. And if they want to do a stone monument one, that would be our recommendation, I think, anyway, to go back to them and say, get us a new design with something that's going to blend with the school and the bridge, and come back to us.
Okay, as a nearby resident and graduate of North High, I don't think it has a place anywhere on that parcel. Number one, there are new studies out that this type of sign can be a driver distraction. That is a horrible location because there's a crosswalk right there. Students are going back and forth for lunch, as well as entry and exit from North High. It's a highly dangerous crosswalk already. There have been numerous near accidents and accidents there. We don't need that distraction. Number two, any kind of LED reader sign is going to distract from the architecture of the school and the historic significance. It belongs back closer to where the current sign is. Have no problem with that. I spent 15 minutes today, contacted about 7 people, and they are willing to get petitions of hundreds of people that would not want this on the grounds of North High.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
I believe there's a comment from the public. Susie, do you have anything to add? Okay, never mind.
I think you might have gotten some emails already, Christina. And
I haven't received an email about this.
I'm sorry?
I haven't received any emails about the proposed signage.
Well, I personally forwarded one that came to me because they couldn't get it. They didn't have your address. It's from Sharon Ferry. I feel the proposed LED sign at Wichita North High School is inappropriate. It distracts from an iconic building. It is unnecessary. The sign could be placed on other property district now owns near the school, such as corner of 13th and Waco. It would be more visible, yet less distracting to the building. Thank you for taking my comments into consideration. For the newer people, young people, Sharon is a past City Council District 6 representative and a past member of the Historic Preservation Board.
Hey, may I ask you a question? So North High, they own all that property all the way to the corner of 13th and Waco?
Yes.
So almost any.
259 does.
Okay. I was not aware of that, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of locations further away from that crosswalk. I mean, you've got the bridge, which is a little bit of a visual block, and you've got, sorry, but you've got so many school kids who are just learning to drive, coming in, they mostly drive to school there. Over 2,000 students. And so about 500 new drivers always are trying to go by there. And you've got crosswalks that are busy, and it's just a very poor location, either where Christina mentioned a little closer to this teacher parking, or where they are currently looking at putting it. It's dangerous, and it's not a good location historically.
Hi, is it my turn?
Yes, go ahead, Susie.
I happen to live straight down Llewellyn Street, which if that street went through would cut right through where the sign is. And that is kind of an iconic scene where you drive drive down that street, you have arching trees that show the tower up here. But really, living where I live, I move my cars up into the driveway. I have a single driveway with 2 cars, and it's a lot of extra trouble, but we always make sure when the kids are going to school and getting out of school to move them out of their way. The first 3 years we lived here, it was like bumping cars. We kept getting our cars dinged. They are new drivers. It would be distracting, and I'm worried that I don't know which direction you would orientate that sign, if it would be perpendicular or parallel to the face of the building. But if it's perpendicular, coming out of the parking lot that's used by the school board, they have them in the evenings, usually on Monday nights. That might cause some problems being able to pull out and see down the street. And also that bridge is an arched.
It's limited to historic and not out into the world of safety and all of that. This is the Historic Preservation Board, so I'd really like to keep it focused on that aspect, please.
Well, it doesn't fit. I think you've
there you go. Got it.
It doesn't fit.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the staff recommendation? Hearing none, I would like for someone to make a motion to accept the staff recommendation of denial.
Willenberg moves to deny the application.
Engel seconds.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the staff recommendation of denial. All those in favor of denial, please state yay.
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 So I would like to point out that the applicant has the option of going to city council within 7 days.
All those not in favor of the staff recommendation state nay. Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion moves to deny the applicant. The vote was 7-0. Which moves us down to adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Engel moves that we adjourn.
Willenberg seconds.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say yay.
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 Those opposed say nay. We are adjourned.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
job.